We're just going to go ahead and get started. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for coming to the early ethics session. My name is Kim Seaton. I am one of the co-chairs of this year's event, along with Bridget Romero. And we will do our full introductions before the 9 a.m. session, but I want to introduce our first speaker, Ayub Ajmi. He's the Director of Legal Innovation and Technology at the University of Missouri Kansas City School of Law. Among his other many accomplishments, he's currently leading the growth of the Legal Technology Laboratory at the law school. He teaches classes that didn't exist when I went to law school, including legal technology competency skills, law practice systems and document automation courses, and he is here to talk to us about generative AI and the law. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. Thanks for being here so early. I hope you have enough coffee. It's gonna get ugly, so, all right. So as Kim mentioned, my name is Ayub Ajmi. I teach legal technology at UMKC School of Law. I also develop tools for courts, mostly in access to justice, and I have been experimenting a lot with generative AI. So the good thing is we are all new to generative AI, so I'm not, I know a little bit more, but you can get there. So it's we're gonna make it easy. We're gonna go through some foundational concepts about generative AI. We will talk about AI in general. We have to go talk about some nuances with AI that helps us understand where we are right now in this field. I will share with you some work I'm doing in generative AI. Some of it is actually live and helping pro se litigants in few states, and other things that just ideas I want to share with you. I have 50 minutes and I don't want to be talking for 50 minutes, so I encourage you to ask me questions because I really don't know what to expect and I don't want to be talking about something that is not of interest to you. So feel free to jump in, ask for microphones, I think there are some around, or shout your question and I will try to repeat it for the live audience, and let's have a discussion. But I have plenty of material, so if you don't want to ask a question, I'm just going to keep talking. All right, so the first thing I like to do, this is the time where you can bring your cell phone. Let's do a quick survey. This is an anonymous survey. There is a QR code there, or you can use the short URL. Basically, the survey asks those following questions. If you are using generative AI, what are you doing with generative AI? And I will keep the QR code on the next few slides, and then later on, we're gonna show the results and talk a little bit about that. So we are already using AI. AI is not new. So AI is embedded in many of the daily activities that we do. If you are watching Netflix or Hulu or any of the application, you have recommendations. If you go to Amazon, you have recommendations. Those are AI-based. They learn your habits. They learn things that you like to watch, and then they suggest things that you may want to watch. Email filters are all AI, so this is how emails are filtered, this is how spam are filtered, how newsletters are filtered, and they are put in separate folders. That's all AI. So chatbots, AI-based translation, especially now with generative AI, it's getting really good. On the HR field, resume screening is done by AI, like Indeed and other applications. They recommend jobs, they recommend candidates and things like that using AI. Credit scoring and even phone deals they use AI to determine the best plan to the person based on either their income, zip code where they live, and things like that. So you can really think about some issues that we will be addressing later on. But artificial intelligence in general, it's more complex than that. It has a lot of components within it. I want to focus on two main things, which are subsets of artificial intelligence, which is machine learning and natural language processing. Those are how the basis of what we see now. This is the basis of why we have generative AI so common and everyone now can use it and can build AI tools. So machine learning, when you hear machine learning, it's basically training the machine to do certain tasks. It's a lot of math, which I don't understand, and they are trained on material. that training can happen in two ways. It could happen in a supervised way, or it could happen in an unsupervised way. In a supervised way, the algorithm is trained on data sets, which means that the data that comes in, it gets labeled, and you tell the machine what it means, and the machine will learn from that. In an unsupervised learning, you don't necessarily tell the machine what that data is, and the machine will learn by itself. So let's get to some examples on supervised learning. For example, we have sets of resumes, and then those are prior hires that you have done, and you have labeled them. So you say, this is a good one, this is a bad one, this is a good one, this is a bad one. And then you feed that information to a system, and the system will scan those resumes and then start to learn based on your preferences. Next time when you upload a new resume, it can say, okay, based on prior hires, will be a good hire. So this is what's supervised learning. And then it takes hundreds or thousands of data that you put into the system, so the system can learn and can give you probably good estimates. Sometimes you don't get it wrong, but you can also retrain systems, especially when you have new type of information that you want the system to learn about. Okay? On an unsupervised learning, as I mentioned earlier, we don't necessarily have that information. So the system does not necessarily know a good hire from a bad hire. But you still have to upload a lot of information. For example, you upload job satisfaction surveys, you upload performance reviews, you upload a lot more information to the system. The system will start learning on that information, and then it will start creating clusters of people based on things they learn about them. It could be like, okay, this group of people, they perform better if they do this and this and that. And that's probably insight that you didn't know before. And that's why the unsupervised learning is important, and I think the more powerful one is the unsupervised learning. So it just basically gives you information that you didn't know existed based on a lot of information. When you have thousands of files or documents, you can't necessarily see certain things. A machine can see that. All right, so again, supervised learning, it's useful when you have clear examples where the system can learn from. For example, your resume, good hire, bad hire. And in supervised learning, it's useful on discovering the hidden patterns of groups of individuals or whatever information. I'm trying to focus on hiring, but this applies to everything. It could apply to sales, it could apply to manufacturing, whatever information you can think of, this will be helpful for training, using AI to train the machine. So let's talk about generative AI. So as I mentioned before, we will focus only on those two things, machine learning and natural language processing. And generative AI is where the natural language processing happens. We are probably more aware of generative AI in the last less than 2 years, especially with the release of ChatGPT to the public. But generative AI started a few years before that. It was not perfect, but now it's to the point where we can use it in certain applications. This is the basic explanation of how generative AI works. So this is an example on ChatGPT 4, okay? ChatGPT, we will talk more about the differences, but this is explain exactly how generative AI, especially with text, works. So it's all about relationship. So if you say king minus man, what do you think the answer should be? Yeah. And then I asked ChatGPT 4, and then this is the answer for ChatGPT, and then it tells me that based on, I basically tell it, I don't really understand that, can you explain that to me? So it's a relationship. ChatGPT is trained on a lot of information. It's trained on public information. Any publicly available information, websites, books, encyclopedias, it knows that information. So it knows enough information so it can start guessing the next word. And that's basically how it works. It doesn't necessarily understand what it's saying, but it gets mostly correct because it has some data that it has been trained on where it can always guess the right word. So this is with GPT-4. And then I did the same test with GPT 3.5. So that's a model. This is a little bit older than 4. And then I got a different answer. So for 3.5, king minus man is ing. I did not get that. And it's not a wrong answer. So it's basically, again, I asked GPT to explain how it did that, and then this is the explanation it gave me. So basically, it plays with the word, and then it subtracts certain characters, and then you have ing, what is left. So it's not totally wrong, but this is not what you expect. So this is give us a hint of how generative AI works, but also the difference between models, okay? 3.5 and 4. So before we go deeper, let's talk about certain terminology. Because we hear the OpenAI, ChatGPT, it become like a word. It's like Google thing, I'm gonna GPT, ChatGPT, this or that. But sometimes those differences are not, those explanations are not, or descriptions are not accurate. So OpenAI is the company, like Google or Microsoft. So it's called OpenAI. They have a product called ChatGPT, okay? So Google, for example, they don't have ChatGPT. They have another product called Gemini. It was called Bard, and then they changed it to Gemini. And then other companies have other products. GPT, or GPT-4 in this example, is the model, okay? So that's the model that ChatGPT is based on. Do you know that Microsoft owns 49% of OpenAI? So they have access to the GPT model. So Microsoft have that GPT model and they use it for their products. OpenAI make the GPT model available to developers so they can build applications using that model. So this is basically their business model. They don't give you access to ChatGPT. ChatGPT is customer-facing interface that you can use it for free. You get the slow, the not so accurate version, 3.5, or you can pay $20 a month and you get 4, which is much better than 3.5. Last Monday, they released a new model called 4.0 for Omni. You may hear a word multi-model models. So the previous models are usually text-based, and sometimes they have images, but it's usually text-based. The new models are multi-model, so they have text, voice, and audio, so they can hear, they can talk, and they understand text. I encourage you, if you have not seen the demonstration, to Google them. It's 25 minutes long, and if you have watched the movie Her, Joaquin and Scarlett Johansson, so even the voice that GPT-4 now is talking to, it resembles Scarlett Johansson, so I think they got some inspirations from that movie. It does pretty much exactly that, where you can have a phone and it talks to you, super nice, and it's really interesting to see the developments in just a few months. All right. So as I mentioned, we have GPT-4, we have GPT 3.5. Those are models, and those are also known as large language models. And you can see we are mostly talking about language, text. That's how you differentiate between the model. So when you are using a platform, you need to know what model it's built on. That gives you a lot of information on what it does, how much it's gonna cost, and a lot of information that you should know. So GPT-4, like I said, it's an OpenAI. It is used by Microsoft and other companies like Duolingo for translation. It's used a GPT model. So on the column to the right, you have the knowledge cutoff date. You may hear, for example, someone may have tried ChatGPT and they will say, well, ChatGPT does not have information I need. It didn't know some recent news, for example, who won the last Super Bowl. It might not know the answer because there is a cutoff date. What does cutoff date means? So remember when we said it's trained on a lot of data? See, it's basically trained on all human history that is publicly available. That takes months to train. So you have thousands of machines just getting trained and learning and learning. And then at some point, they have to stop the training and release that to the public. When they release that to the public, that's the cutoff date. Anything that happens after that date, that training doesn't know because it already stopped. So that's why you have 3.5 behaving in a really weird way versus 4, because it has more information and it's trained on more information and newer information. So you will always see cutoff date. So there are other models. There is not just OpenAI. There are other models. OpenAI is pretty much the best so far, just because they have a good head start. But there are other companies. The last one is xAI. Do you know xAI? It's Elon Musk company. Do you remember that Elon and other tech leaders, they signed a letter last year asking for halt to the development of AI? I think it was just a trick so he can have his system up, because there is no reason, because a few months after that, they are doing the same thing. So there is a race and everyone is trying to compete. The one that I want to also highlight is Meta, which is Facebook. They released their model, it's called Llama 3, and it's open source. It's almost as good as GPT-4, which is much better than 3.5 and almost as good as GPT-4. So it's really powerful and it's free. So free, you can use it, you can develop your applications, and you can start building tools using the free model. The reason I mention free, because like GPT-4, it's 22 times more expensive than 3.5. It can get really expensive once you start using those tools. For example, for law schools, they have access to Lexis Plus AI as part of their subscriptions. Westlaw also, they have one. In the back end, they will switch between 4 and 3 to save basically money based on the type of information you are requesting. So they can switch models so they don't have to pay tons of money. So those are the large language models, and those are basically the base of generative AI. The cutoff dates are not important as, yes?
Is there any mechanism in these units on their large language model to filter the accuracy of what they're training on, or are they trying to approach that?
So the question is if those large language models have any mechanism to filter information, for example, fake news and deep fake and all that stuff. I don't think so by themselves. I'm pretty sure the companies they're doing guardrails. For example, they prevent system from saying certain things or asking about certain things. For example, if you use GPT and say generate an image of President Biden, it will not do that. And then, so there are some public figures that will not do that. There are copyrighted information that will not do it, but it's hit and miss. So for the copyright information, if you say like SpongeBob, it will create literally SpongeBob, the character, because there is not enough data of diversity in SpongeBob. There's only one SpongeBob. The same thing happened with Pikachu. So all those characters, they are kind of unique, and there is not a lot of variation. It will create the character itself, which could be an intellectual property issue. And the same thing for the information. I don't think the LLMs are the one who should control that information. Those are just tools. So whoever using them, that's where I think that we have to be careful. And we will talk about a few examples later on, but thank you. So for the cutoff date, it does not really make any sense anymore to talk about cutoff date, just because there are other ways where they can embed new information to a system. Like right now with GPT-4 and GPT-4o, it does no news. And the reason is because it goes search the web and then gives you an answer like Google used to do. And this is where Google is in trouble, because the whole business model for Google is based on search and advertisement. So you need to go to pages, it gives you those 10 blue links, and you click on those pages, you go to those pages and you see ads, and that's how Google makes money. If you ask a question and you get an answer, they are not going to be making money anymore. So this is the innovator's dilemma, basically. They are stuck. Their business model in a way that if they improve, they will screw up their business model, especially on the short term. So now I rarely Google anything. I did not use Google for a while because there is always ads and stuff that you have to dig deeper to get the answer you want. So now with GPT, you can get answers because it does know the news, it does know current information. All right. Do you want to show us the results and see if you want to put it a little bit larger? Yeah, I do this survey every time, and I'm always excited to see what research and generative text is pretty much the same. This is the first time I see more others than the rest. Email filters. Interesting. So thank you for sharing that. If anyone knows any other way, or they have an interesting way they want to share, feel free to do that. Okay. So let's talk about some practical uses of AI, and we will talk about hiring. So using AI for hiring could save you time, could save you money. It helps with bias, although that's also one of the bad things about using AI for hiring. Okay? So it does, just because of the way it analyzes information, like sometimes we hire people like in the library or somewhere in the law schools, and especially for the library positions for students, I get like hundreds of applications. And most of them, they just click submit. They don't really even read the description. And I have to go through each one of them. It just takes like a week of my time just to hire a student to sit at the desk. So I wish we had some AI in our system so it can flag irrelevant information and give me just the one I want to hire. But there are many issues with that. So that's one of the main problems with AI, especially in hiring. So there's a lot of bias with that. And then that goes back to the deep fake and fake news information. So let's talk about that. So those tools are not inherently biased. The machine is not there to discriminate against people. But remember earlier on, that machine needs some information to get trained. So if the information used to train that system is biased, you will get biased output. So garbage in, garbage out. And that applies to everything. It applies to the quality of information, it applies to what you can expect those tools to do. So in supervised learning, it's the same thing. So if that information does not reflect geographic location or information, the system, without knowing it, will start discriminating against certain applicants, just because the information that the systems know is biased itself. In an unsupervised learning, it's the same way. It will, without telling the system anything, the system is smart enough to start discriminating based on the information you give the system. If you only give a group of information for a certain demographic information, and those are always the one that you hire, and those are always the one who succeed in their job, you can be certain next time you're gonna upload information and those people meet those criteria, they're gonna get thumbs up. And if they don't meet those criteria, they get a thumbs down. It has nothing to do with their skills, that has nothing to do with their abilities to perform their job correctly. It's just based on the information that you picked and the parameters that you picked for your system. So here is an example of this that happened in 2016. So Brisha was 18 years at that time in Florida, and then with her friend, she was late to her god sister to pick her up, and then they found those small razor scooters for kids in a property. So they pick two and they start strolling so they can go faster. They figure out those are too small for them, they're just toys, they throw them away. It was too late. Someone saw them, they called 911, she was arrested. The other person also, he's 41 years old, Vernon. He was arrested stealing some tools from Home Depot. The value of the tools, $86, the value of the toys, $83. So when they were booked, the jail, they used a system called Compass. That system, based on questionnaire, they asked them a few questions, and then based on public information, they scored their, basically, the potential of being high risk, basically. So she scored high risk, he scored 3. Well, Vernon is known convict, he has been in jail so many times, he has a rap sheet this big. Brisha, she has never done any trouble in her life. So that's the only thing she has, and the system flagged as high risk. 2 years later, Vernon was arrested again for burglary, and he's spending 8 years in jail. So the system got the information wrong. And that the system that is used, and is still used in many jurisdictions. This is another example where bias in the information. This is in healthcare. So basically, the system uses a large set of information to estimate the healthcare needs. The way the system works, it's based on how much you spend on healthcare. So if you spend more on healthcare, that means you need more healthcare and you get more resources. And you can already see how this does not make any sense. So if you are poor, in a poor neighborhood, poor person, you probably don't have sick time, so you don't even get to go seek health. You can't afford health, and you get punished because of that. And those who live in different zip codes, they get better health because they already spending more money on health. So that's another example. Amazon had an internal tool. They were testing it. It was, from what they say, it was just a project where it helps them screen resumes. And the system used 10 years old information on hiring. Remember the supervised training? So they put all their resumes, the good one, the bad one, and they put them in a system. And then they train the system so that they can filter through the thousands of applications they get. So the problem with that is, as in most tech jobs, it's male, mostly white male dominant. The system by itself start knowing female from male in the application. And the way it does that from schools they attended and the gap in their experiences. So if someone took time off, give birth, and then come back to job, the system will know, okay, we are dealing with the female. And it start discriminating against, not because of their gender, but just because of the performance based on the majority of information they have. Because those, they don't give birth, and they go to the same type of schools, like not female only schools, for example. And the system learned to be biased against female applicants. So they canceled that project, of course. There was another case of another person in 2013 that went to the Supreme Court where, for due process, because the prosecutor used Compass, the software. And the court, they said that it was not a case, the system was not biased. The reason is because even if the defendant and the prosecutor, they did not know how the system works. And he was not told about the system, but the court still thinks that there was not discrimination because that was not the only factor that the judge used to sentence the person. This system used on prediction, used on sentencing, and a lot of information. But the judges have the final decision, so they did not think that was a problem. The study with the ProPublica about the bias that we talked about earlier, so there are 3 researchers that looked at how ProPublica did their research, and they figured out that ProPublica was not wrong and Compass was not wrong. It's just a matter of how that tool was, how it was basically adjusted. So the tool itself is not biased. It's just, so there's so many technical information in this study, but the idea is the tool is not biased. So what needs to be done needs to be some transparency and need to know how to adjust those tools based on your demographic, based on who you are dealing with. If the system is trained on like Amazon, for example, if the bulk of the information comes from one specific gender, one specific type of education, it will be biased. So you have to have diversity in the system before you can expect the output to be diverse. All right, so a few ways on mitigating bias in this example. So like I said, the data that you put in your system, that's where the work needs to be done. And then we will talk about practical examples where that's very important. So you have to make sure that your data itself is not biased. We have a history of that, but it's not, like I said, the system's still better. And there are cases where in parole offices, if the judge take a break for lunch, they give a different sentencing than if they are hungry. So there are a lot of biases. Like when I'm grading exams, the first one, they always get the lowest grade. And then once I start getting tired, I just want to get it done. So you have to change, for example, in grading, we don't do that. It's just you mix them, you take breaks, or you grade first question for everyone, the second question for everyone. Frisk and search in New York, it was known that 88% of people who were arrested were Black and Latinos, even if they represent less than 50% of the population. So I will probably take a robot than human in this case. I would trust a robot than trust in a human, especially if you are a minority or if you are in situations like this. So systems can work if they are trained properly, if they are using information to train them, if the system is transparent. This is a big deal. Remember when we were talking about large language models, one I told you to pay attention to was Llama 3, because it was open source. If you are using open source, you basically can see the code. So you can see how the system makes those decisions. You will not see that if you are using, for example, Compass. It's a proprietary system. They are not going to tell you how they do that analysis. So this is where transparency comes in. It's another company, not Compass. They do analysis of job interviews. Basically, they scan they watch the videos and they can determine emotions and reactions, and based on that, they can give you some hints on hiring. They release the paper to explain how they do that. So when you are picking a system, try to at least understand how the system works. It will be difficult if you are using a proprietary system, of course. That's why I think the future is open source with this type of systems. And then the last thing is the human loop. The system should not be the one determining the outcome by itself. You always have someone, which can be, again, if you go to my example, when I have 100 resume, if my system were kicking out people, I will not even know who are those people. So I don't know how practical having a human loop, if your goal is to make things faster, make things cheaper, that could be a problem. So we are in a weird spot where we see a lot of advancement, we see a lot of good things that could happen, but there's also bad things that could happen. And we have to figure out and find a way to use the technology without harming populations we work with. So based on issues we talked about earlier, and especially with generative AI, many states are trying to do that. So basically they are trying to encourage, basically be transparent. If you are using a system, you should tell people that you are using that system. In New York, for example, they have 3 rules where you have to tell them that you are using the system, you have to give them an option to not use the system, and then you have to explain to them how the system is making that decision. Others, they just, basically, you just have to be transparent and tell them we are using the system to do this and this and that. At the federal level, this is a new one. It's like 39 pages 2 days ago. I didn't have time to read it. So I uploaded it to ChatGPT and told them, give me the hints of how this regulation could affect human resources and hiring and employment, and give me those bullet points. I will never be able to do that on my own. So, so there are some, those are recommendations, those are not laws, but we can see how transparency, the human loop, and understanding how the system works is probably our way out of having any issues with those systems. Are we good? Any question before we move further? Okay, so we talked about bias, let's talk about security. Security for me is the most important one, to be honest with you, just because of it's easy to, I get tons of emails about, we have this tool, it's the best, we are the best in the country, we do this, we do that. And then there's always this hype and companies trying to use AI as a hype to promote their products. They are not necessarily making anything new. So you have to be careful when picking software. You have to be careful when picking free software. If it's free, you are the product. So just let's be clear. So don't expect anything from free software. So we have to be very careful about that. And then we have to be careful about confidentiality, where information is being stored, and what information are you storing in those systems. One way to do that is to read the terms of services and understand how those systems work. You don't need to be a coder, but just get some basic understanding of those systems. It will give you a lot of ideas of what to expect in terms of confidentiality and security. So let's start with terms of services. Those are highlights from OpenAI terms of services, and then we can see that you own the input, you own the output, which means like if you are uploading some information, that's your information. And if the ChatGPT generates text, that's become your text, so you are free to use it. They could use your information to improve their services. Improve their services in this case, I think it means training the system. So we have to be very careful about that, because the way the system is trained, and it's not, I don't really know how your information could be used to train the system, and I don't know how exactly your information will be used to train the system. Meaning, like, if you put something in the system, are they going to use it literally as is and give it to someone else? I don't think so, but I don't really know, to be honest with you. But just know that your information could be used to train the system. That's black and white. You can opt out from that. So when you subscribe to OpenAI, you can opt out. You're not going to be able to do this if you're on the free version, just to be clear again. If you have the paid version, there is an option when you can say, don't use my information, delete everything. By default, OpenAI will keep a history of your searches. You can remove that. So there are measures that you can do to protect your information. If you are using any personal information or proprietary information, you probably should not uploading that to OpenAI. Doesn't mean you should not using OpenAI, but when you use it, don't upload personal information. That's the safest thing to do. Because OpenAI is it's a customer-facing platform. It's a consumer product. If you want to use generative AI with your proprietary information, you should have an enterprise level. OpenAI have an enterprise level. Enterprise level is like when you have Microsoft Outlook in your company. That's an enterprise. If you don't have an enterprise level, you probably have Hotmail or Live or Gmail. Those are consumer products. If you have a G Suite, you have the enterprise level. It's completely different terms of service, completely different servers, and there is much more security there. Of course, you pay a lot more to use an enterprise level than to use a consumer level. So the idea that OpenAI or ChatGPT will use your information, it's not necessarily true. It depends. It depends how you are using it. It depends what information you put, and it depends what service you are using. So the last sentence there is very important. Remember I told you earlier, Microsoft owns 49% of OpenAI. They have their GPT model. They don't need OpenAI to run the GPT model. When the CEO of OpenAI was fired for a weekend a few months ago, and then there was like big issues like, oh, is OpenAI gonna close? So because a lot of employees were leaving as well in solidarity with Sam Altman. Microsoft quickly released, said, we are safe. We have the GPT model. So even though OpenAI disappeared tomorrow, they still have the system. So this is very important because one of the examples I'm going to share with you, it's built on Microsoft Azure for this reason. Microsoft Azure it's like Amazon. They have AWS, Amazon Web Servers. It's basically their server network. All right. But we also hear some companies, they say, well, we do this better. How do they do that? How do they prevent fake news, for example? How do they prevent deep fake? How do they prevent bias in their research and information like that? Man, 10 minutes. Okay. So, Co-Counsel, it's a product of Thomson Reuters. I told you about Lexis AI Plus. The first thing is they don't have large language models. If they say that, they are lying. So they don't have large language models because it's simple. Only the big companies can afford to build a large language model. GPT 3.5 cost $90 million to build. GPT-4, $500 million. So Lexis AI, they are not going to spend $500 million to build a model. What they use fine-tuning, they use prompt engineering, and they use retrieval augmented generation. And I will explain. I'm going to skip prompt engineering. In the material, you have some information about that. And I'm going to go to RAG. Retrieval augmented generation. So when you ask a question to an LLM, you get an answer from the LLM. When you add a retrieval augmented generation system, I am not asking the LLM about the news. I have my own database of news that I trust, and I'm retrieving answers from my own information. I'm sending that information to the LLM to get it in a natural language way so people can understand what I'm saying. Big application of this are chatbots. And this is a tool that I'm working with the state of Nevada to build, and we are in the final stages, done the testing, and we are very happy with the answers. This is a system used to help pro se litigants to learn more about legal issues in the state of Nevada. So we had some issues. I don't want someone from California chatting in my system and getting those answers and applying them in California. It's not the same jurisdiction. I don't want the system to give, for example, answers about expungement because I did not have that information in my system. So I needed to control what answer that system will give. And I didn't want the system to hallucinate. So I want to give me some true information. The system is trained on divorce, protection order, service, and court location. In a typical chatbot, basically you will have certain questions to pick from, topics, and then you pick a topic, and then you have a question that someone has put. And then if you pick one of those questions that they give you, you get an answer that someone had written before. The system gets confused when someone asks a question in natural language, especially if they are using lingo, or they are not using English, or they are using asking about things that you don't have. So that your system will not give them the answer. If you want to convert your HR manual book to be a chat interaction, and someone asks something is not in your information, they are not going to get an answer. When you build generative AI into the system, the answer could be completely different. So if the same person is asking about dispute with a neighbor, about noise, and there is threat of harm, well, the system knows immediately they need protection order, they need harassment, they don't need DV order, domestic violence, because there is no existing relationship. Those are neighbors. They also threaten them to hit them and to come back and get them. So there is threat of violence, so they should have protection against harassment. This is kind of a dangerous situation, so you may need to call 911. And by the way, we have an online interview that you can use to file for protection. Do you want to proceed? So this is something that the system can build, and you can train the system to give answers like that. This is live. Feel free to try it. I'm going to go really quick because I don't have time. This is how retrieval augmented works, and I published a paper on this issue if you want to get more information. So again, we have our question, and remember our knowledge base. This is the exact same thing we talked about early on about garbage in, garbage out. When we were testing this system, I was using the publicly available information in the court website. It was good information, but it was not for the machine, it was for humans. So it had a lot of repetition, it had a lot of contradiction, and the system was giving me wrong answers. One example is, if I ask how do I change a name for my child, it will give me the instructions, because similar to child, but then it will confuse changing your name if you are an adult, confusing the steps with the adult name change. The reason is the instructions say, if you want to change your name, step 1, step 2, step 3. Well, we'll quickly learn that we should not be doing that with the machine. We have to be very precise. We have to say, step 1 of changing your name for adult, step 2 of changing, otherwise it will confuse that information. And if you have information that is contradicting, the system won't know which one to pick. And we are only talking about small set of data, basically maybe 10 Word documents. Imagine if you are building a large language models with billions of parameters. Can you guess how problems can happen when information is contradicting? That's what causes hallucination in ChatGPT, for example. So based on my answers, it told me you need, it gives me answer about protection order, gives me answer about links to protection order, and the prompt is what I tell the system to behave as. I tell the system, you are a court advocate, you are a victim advocate, helping people understand processes in the court in Nevada. If they are in different jurisdiction, you have to tell them that you can't help them. If you detect danger in their text, you need to always tell them to call 911. You literally give instructions to the system using words. And that's how the system behaves. Like one example, at the beginning when you ask, where is my court located, for example, without telling the location, it will split out all the information we have about courts. And those are like 40 of them or more. So we needed to change that in the prompt. And the way we did that is we told the prompt, if someone is asking about court location, ask them what county they are in. And then the system start doing that. You will tell, where is my court? It will tell you, can you tell me which county are you in? I will say Clark County, and it will tell me, well, here is the address, here is the phone number, here's the email, here is the name of the judge or the clerk, for example. So you can play with this, and it takes back and forth. This is almost more than 12 months. We are testing and building it, and it's behaving really well. So now I pick my answer, my question, I pick the information from my knowledge base, and I pick the prompt, and I send everything to GPT-4. And GPT-4, using that information, give me this beautifully narrated text. So here are the good things with this. As a user, I can go back and say, sorry, my English is really poor. Can you translate that into Spanish? It will do that. And I say, well, can you summarize this? It will do that. Can you give me bullet points? It will do that. And then you can ask question in any language, even if your information is strictly in English. So the question will get translated to English, and then you pick up the answer in English and translate it back to the user on their own language. So this is just one example of practical use of AI that I wanted to share with you. I don't have a lot of time, but I'm at UMKC. Google me or call me or email me. I would love to talk to you. I build tools for courts. I build tools and I train students how to build tools themselves. And I think this is the future of the law. The intersection of law and technology is what's really gets me going and see how we can help people. If you don't know that, 3 years ago, UMKC would design the Kansas Protection Order Portal. It's a protection to help people here in the state of Kansas file for domestic abuse and harassment online without having to go to court. The system was designed at UMKC with the help of the students and librarians. In the last 3 years, more than 65,000 eligibility review has been done. More than 25,000 protection order petition has been filed online. More than 75% of all protection order in Kansas are done in this system. 35% of petitions are filed outside of business hours. The system is used by pro se litigants, by private attorneys, and by advocates. And this is just one example of small technology that could do to help people. So I'm looking forward on using generative AI and other tools to do even more damage. So thank you.